Welcome to AGAPE Social Justice, where we focus on love, truth, and justice. Last month, you met Ms. Tia Marie Sanders, one of Oakland County's top activists, and we talked about a number of issues, including education. But today, she's going to come back and talk to us about something that is very important, something that many people are not familiar with, and that's the topic of reparations. Tia Marie, thank you so much for joining us again today.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the time that we had before. I'm glad to come back
absolutely.
again and talk about just the rest of the initiatives that we're working on.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to start right from the beginning
hmm
because, to be honest, most of us are not familiar with reparations. So let's just start with the definition. First of all, what do we mean when we say reparations? Because there's a lot of different definitions out there.
We mean it from the context of where the United States federal government means it, because they have actually paid out reparations many, many times, almost 76 different times in our U.S. history. So many other groups except for Black individuals. And what we mean by reparations is the redress for the harm that has been done. In this case, a financial harm, labor for no payment,
Mm-hmm.
the brutality that was experienced that caused harm and long-term generational trauma. We also mean the policies and the codes that were put in place
Mm.
in order to really redirect dollars away from a particular group. And so the federal government actually has a Department of Redress, which pays out reparations, and
Okay.
reparations is monetary.
Okay. All right. Plain
Mhm.
and simple.
Very.
So there are a lot of debates out there, right?
hmm
In terms of people who are trying to figure out on their own where they think money should go. Some people are saying it should go toward home ownership. Some are saying it should go toward education. Tell the listening audience why you think we need to solely focus on it being cash reparations.
Yes. So the reason why it needs to be cash reparations, again, because the federal government has never given reparations and then instructed people how to use them.
Mm.
If you think about any kind of settlement, the court, as well as the person paying the settlement, do not get to tell the person receiving the settlement how in which they pay and what
Good
they
point.
use that settlement for.
Good point.
And so we don't expect any new particular laws or policies to change the way reparations has been handed out, which has been monetary in the form of checks, as well as how it gets spent and on what it gets spent on, because we just don't do that as a country. We never have. And as we talk about reparations for lineage-based people that are tied to their lineages tied to chattel slavery, we don't expect it to be any different for our group either.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for people who are saying there's a department that actually handles this,
Yes.
tell us more about that department and who are some of the groups who've actually received reparations?
The department that has been the Department of Redress, our federal government created after we had our Japanese citizens in internment camps.
Hmm.
And there was literally a rounding up of their citizens. They were removed from their homes, they were taken from their jobs. And the time that they were in those camps, they lost their businesses, they lost their homes. Many of them lost the ability to, once they were returned, to go back into the workforce. This level of discrimination and this level of codified hate and codified separateness actually impacted them financially. So the Department of Justice worked with our federal government, and including our Federal Reserve,
Hmm.
in order to design the Department of Redress to properly handle how does the United States actually recoup that harm? How do they make those folks whole? And how do they get the sort of restore them back to where they had lost?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been around since about, I believe, 1954. And so that department has also made sure that our Native American or indigenous people have received reparations. There have been reparations specifically for particular groups that were affected by land that was taken or that was eminent domain that was
Hmm.
taken from folks, so they lost their property. The Department of Redress has done a lot of work for every other group, but they have never addressed chattel slavery and the lasting long-term effects of that impact financially on lineage-based foundational Black Americans.
Thank you for that, because I have a lot of people who think that this is like something brand new, that we're trying to create something that doesn't already exist. And so
We
thank you
can
for
go
sharing
back
that.
as it relates to chattel slavery. The folks, the slave owners who actually, according to the federal government, lost slaves
Hmm.
due to slavery ending,
Hmm.
were actually given some of the first reparations
Right.
around slavery.
Right. That's absolutely true.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit about how you got here. How did you find out about this? I mean, I know for you, this is one of your signature initiatives now.
Exactly.
So talk about how you found out and what shifted.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why it is really the catalyst for all other work that is done around addressing the community is because I can draw a complete straight line to the disparities, the financial disparities in the
Mhm.
Black community directly to that redress never being
Mm.
addressed. As we talk about housing, as we talk about education, even our savings and our ability to have savings and start businesses has been because we were never put in the proper footing like all other groups in order to have that initial start. And then when you couple that with codes and laws and policies that also redirect dollars away from us, every attempt to actually get to the point of having those dollars for our community has also been thwarted.
Mm.
And so for me, since I've ever existed as a human being and understood why my existence was different than the child that sat next to me in my
Mhm.
classroom or the kids that lived in my neighborhood or the business owners, why were some businesses allowed to be open and other businesses struggling? Right now in the state of Michigan, only about 4% of our residents, which we have almost 1.3 million Black folks, we only hold about 4% of the Black businesses. Most of the other businesses are able to get loans and grants in order to open and start, and we get less than 1%. And so for me, I draw a direct line to the success and the thrivability of foundational Black Americans has to be tied directly to that redress being paid. Why is it important to me? As a family, my brother is also Tariq Nasheed,
Mhm.
who has done multiple documentaries, five or six now to total, around what is our history, where does this lineage come from, and how do we go about getting reparations? The other sort of pushback is that, like, oh, that was something that happened a long time ago. Well, many of those codes are actually still in documentation in many of our
Mhm.
communities.
Mhm.
Also, there's a notion of like, well, the people that exist today did not contribute to the harm, so
Mhm.
why should the people of today pay for the harm? Well, the people of today reap the benefits and they don't have that same thought process.
Mhm.
So as you're reaping the benefits of how successful our country is, how we're the richest country in the world, and we are the most welcoming country in the world,
Mhm.
you have to also take the fact that we have not redressed everyone
Mhm.
as we have done every other group.
Absolutely. And some of the benefits too is that their families have passed on businesses that have existed for hundreds of years.
Exactly.
And I think about, I remember it wasn't too long ago, honestly, when I started learning more about Black Bottom and a lot of areas that were thriving, and how as we had upward mobility, there were people who literally bombed
Mm-hmm.
our cities and our towns, and that held us back from being able to
Exactly.
pass that legacy on like
Exactly.
other communities did. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
And
agree
so
with
we want to really, the work that we're doing today is to, one, definitely acknowledge our legacy of our
you.
ancestors
Hmm.
who did this work and have been doing this work long before we have. Our goal is not to outdo their work or to not acknowledge their work, but to do our portion in our time. I
Okay.
hope that this work ends in my lifetime, but
Mm.
if not, we're prepared that this will go on for generations until we have the redress that we are due. Our main focus right now is not just from the federal standpoint, which we know that there's a lot of work being done at the federal level, but we saw some opportunities with after Illinois and California that there were a
Mm.
possibility of looking at reparations from a state point of view and even more distinctly from a county point of view and
Hmm.
leveraging the funds in each state, which are determined because we have something very wonderful in our Constitution, and that is states' rights. And those states' rights give us the ability to make decisions for ourselves as a state that even outside of the federal government, whether they get to reparations or not, we're able to make some decisions right here. But what does that look like? That looks like that, one, we have to get our bill in front of the right folks, our appropriations committee, the right legislators, as well as in front of our governor, which right now, after this most recent success of a particular party in the most recent election, we believe that this is the best time to actually present some of those policies and to put that bill in front of our state decision makers and actually get it passed this time. And what we're looking at it from in terms of checks is a living wage. You've heard probably in the last couple of years around different political figures what it looks like to have a living wage. They've done a lot of the grassroots work for us that we believe that not only can reparations happen and happen on a monthly basis in the form of a check because the work has already been done, we also looked at the model of COVID. And our federal government spent close to $3 trillion in a matter of 4 months in order to make sure that as an entire community, folks were made whole, that they understood the economic impact of COVID to their businesses, to the way in which they support their families. And so that gave us an even further model as to how we could get this $10.3 trillion, which is where we believe reparations, last studies, show that would have to be administered. We're also working in our county and in our state to determine what lineage a person has. So it really is specifically, you have to have one of your parents that can trace their ancestry, trace their lineage back to chattel slavery. And that's distinct in the sense
And
of,
define that for our listening audience.
yes. So what that means is that you can, the census for Black folks and for slaves in particular, the 1970 census is when a lot of that information began to be accessible. We were actually tracking citizenship before then, but making that information public was not really around until 1870. Where people could actually go back and trace, who was my grandmother, who was my great grandmother, who was my great great grandmother. And so we're working with our county and our state to provide the funds so that people can actually do that historical check without it costing them any money to do so. And then taking that data as a method to validate your lineage. And so this is not at everybody or just poor people, or this is really distinct because all other reparations prior to now have been just that distinct. As long as you could show where your lineage and where your heritage came from, as it related to the harm that the U.S. government wanted to redress, then you were then now qualified to receive that redress.
And that's where the term foundational Black American comes
Correct.
from.
And that's a social term. That being a foundational Black American has been the sort of encompassing term of folks who experience chattel slavery, even if they had been here before slavery. And so your lineage could go back before slavery because you could have family that were here, but they experienced chattel slavery. You had people that were sold. You had families that were disconnected due to slavery. That will show up in your census. And then there's some other legal documents and legal support that we're working with a couple of the HBCUs down in Washington are with, so that we can really bring this whole story together. And just like in any other lawsuit, make the case for why reparations needs to go to that particular individual. So what we're doing right now is building out what that looks like, as well as building our coalition, because we also know that we need to change the hearts and minds of people around reparations so that they understand. The good news is that the most recent poll in our U.S. government, 87% of our citizens said that Black Americans should be getting reparations. 87%.
Wow.
That is the highest number that we have ever had in the last 4 decades.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. I'm kind of taken aback to that. I actually just did a activity not too long ago, and I was talking to a group of Christians, and we were just talking about how, in particular, white Christians even view social justice issues, and the number was like, it was actually something that they were struggling to embrace in terms of seeing how they really don't want to deal with this. So the fact that we're at 87%.
Yes, of the citizens of the United States polled said that they would be in support of reparations. But to
Okay.
your point about the social justice aspect, one of the things that I remember, I was around maybe 11 years old, and I remember hearing, I went to catechism at the time,
Okay.
and I remember hearing that God is the architect of justice.
Mm.
And that is really where, when I ever was questioning whether or not social justice was a part of my faith and a part of my duty as a human being to my neighbor, if God is the architect of justice and I'm a disciple of God, then I'm here to actually ensure that his architecture is built.
That's right.
And so the way in which we look at social justice, I know that it's been maybe mishandled and misdirected as a political point of view,
Mm-hmm.
but politics is policy. That's all that politics is. When you drill it down to what it actually does to everyday citizens,
Mm-hmm.
politics has become to be known as the pageantry that we see on television.
Mm-hmm.
It is not. That is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of,
Sure.
distraction. Politics is policy, and every policy affects every citizen. And so if we look at where do the citizens of that faith show up, they would show up to ensure that God's architecture is built.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I wish I could just package that. I feel like you got a clothing line coming now because I feel like I need to be a billboard saying all these things to people.
Yeah.
So tell us what kind of pushback you're getting and what form that has come in. I mean, I can imagine already people who every time a group steps up and they're talking about our blackness and how to support one another, people always want to say we're racist, or
Exactly.
we're anti something when it's really no, we're just speaking up for our own rights. But what other type of pushback are you getting?
So the main thing is that people saying that the United States cannot afford to pay
Mm.
reparations. That's probably the number one complaint or pushback. That's actually not true. Our entire United States has about $34 trillion in reserve. And
Okay, wait.
so
Say that again.
the United States has $34 trillion in reserve. And our annual U.S. budget to operate as a country only teeters around $4 trillion.
Wow.
So when the federal government gave out $3 trillion additional dollars to handle COVID, we still had something left over in the bank. We are actually looking at right now the most recent numbers around a calculation with inflation, because the longer this goes, the more that they owe. Because it has never been paid. No attempt to pay it, no attempt to address it, is around $10.3 trillion. Now, it doesn't even, the United States could afford to pay all of that at one time, but let's say we look at our living wage, which is, we're looking at a model of between $1,500 and $2,000 a month for a minimum of 25 years and possibly into perpetuity. We're also, one of the other aspects is to put $1 million into a life insurance policy so that also in the death of that person, so let's say they don't make it to 25 years for whatever reason, health, what have you, upon their death, the federal government will pay out a $1 million death benefit. So we have a few things that are involved. So I do want to make sure that people follow this work, acknowledge the work, learn about this work, educate themselves on some of the historical things, because yes, there's going to be a lot of pushback.
Okay. So I do want to get into the specifics in terms of how people can connect and get engaged and go through this history, but let me just tackle something I know that will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use some of those DNA test kits that we order? And some people just ordered them recently because there was a promo for going on at the end of the year. So
we don't believe in those only because they say it themselves. So if you look at the fine print, the fine print on all of those tests says that this is for entertainment purposes only. And entertainment for me is something you do in your leisure, something you do for fun. And in terms of our lineage and our heritage, we just take it much more seriously than an entertainment platform. And so we're really looking at it from the standpoint of the census, which is documentation that you can actually trace back in your family. You do need to know at least your paternal or maternal grandparents. Really, in most cases, only one of them. So if you have some information that's missing. But we have folks that will be working with you so that you don't have to pay. in order to trace this history back. And we take it extremely seriously. So those are great and those are fun for entertainment purposes as they decide, as they have defined, but we are looking a step beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just had to get that out of the way because I know everybody's on that bandwagon,
Yes,
including
yes,
myself these
yes,
days.
yes,
Okay. So I attended an event that you hosted recently.
yes,
So there was a national movement. So talk to
yes.
us about that a little bit because I know your brother was involved in that
Yes, so
too.
my brother Tariq Nasheed, who's a filmmaker of the Hidden Color series, and also we just recently opened the Hidden History Museum in California, where there also be a whole lot more around the reparations and just our history in general. But my brother held a national reparations rally on the mall in Washington that was a huge success. I'm very happy to say. It was just a lot of love and support, and there have been sparked new conversations around what does it look like because they see what the coalition looks like.
Right.
But we also, in solidarity, held a Michigan one. There were 28 states that actually held solidarity rallies.
Okay.
I hosted the one here in Michigan because it's where we're from. But we hosted 3 in one day, which was a huge undertaking. But we had really great support because people do want to understand, and not just Black people, like other people want to understand and are ready to have the conversation about what is reparations, how do we get it, taken care of, what does it mean to our community. Once Black folks get their reparations, we really clear up things like food insecurity, housing insecurity, health disparities. All models have shown that once we have families that have the financial resources around them, they're able to partake and engage in those things in their community and really make a difference. So there's, just as we don't believe that any of the other groups went and misspent the money, they've all been able to open up businesses and really have thriving communities. We don't expect anything less in our community. So in order to follow the work that we're doing in Michigan, you want to go to My Reparations, which is the MI, reparations.org. Definitely get registered there so that you can get updates on our strategy meetings, which we have one coming up on December 17th, and then we'll be meeting each month after that. We have meetings every month that we have on Zoom in order to connect with our different communities, to talk about reparations, the strategy. And we are definitely looking for lawyers. We're looking for people who are good at research. Where the HBCUs have already reached out. But if we have others that want to support this work, we are happy to include them. We are looking for our allies to step up. We also are creating a reparations trust. And so I won't go into all of the details of that
Wow, I'm like
reparations
curious
trust.
now. Yeah.
Yes, the
Okay.
reparations trust will give us again funding in perpetuity, because this redress, it took us several hundred years to get into this really diabolical situation where families are suffering who should not be suffering, and we want to ensure that we not only handle reparations from a point of view of what is necessary today, but to also take care of folks so that they have some sustainability beyond today.
Right. Wow. Okay, that was a lot.
And
That's some amazing work in a relatively short period of time
yeah,
to happen. And the fact that 28 states said
hmm
we're going to do this together. We
yes,
saw what happened on a national scale. I was at
yes,
2 of your events that you hosted in Michigan, and to see the response of the people in the room, that was encouraging for me.
hmm
I mean, it's very inspiring, it's very empowering. There was a lot of dialogue and a lot of education too that took place there.
yes,
I mean, we
yes.
had people who were saying, well, I'm a more and I'm a this, and
hmm
and people are like, okay, what does this
And we
mean?
say we welcome everybody to the table to have the discussion about how foundational Black Americans are able to get reparations. We are not worried so much about delineating who is the what in terms
Hmm.
of how we get the work done.
Hmm.
Where we are really specific is who will we be benefiting?
Right.
And so we believe that there are many allies in all kinds of industries who can help and to support what this work is. We also want people to come to learn that this is not something that's going to happen to you. We want you involved
Okay.
in how we go about doing this, which is one step better than the federal government did, because when they put out the $3 trillion, they did not ask any one of us if that was okay. We're not doing that. We're actually wanting people to come and share their thoughts, share their talents, and really talk about what is a sensible way in which to make sure that this monetary support goes out to the people in the community. And there have already been, right here in Michigan, studies. There's an organization called Generation Reparations, which I'm not a founder of, but I'm very close with the folks who did found it, to really understand. And so they've spent the last 12 months doing reparations in the form of $25,000 payments with select families in order to study what does that look like here in Michigan. So we really do believe that Michigan is poised and in a position over the next couple of years to really see what this looks like in a tangible way.
I absolutely believe that. And I do think, as you have stated, we've had a shift politically, right? And my expectation is that we have the key people, the key players come to the table to be able to listen.
Yes.
Because now there's no more rhetoric, right? No one can come to us and say, well, we can't do that because the other party won't step up and do something. And so I'm standing with you in this, in solidarity. What has been the response from elected officials to date, in particular in Michigan?
Yeah, so one of the questions that was very interesting when we had the rally was the people said to me, which politicians currently support publicly reparations? And at that time, there was only one candidate who actually wasn't in the November 8th election. And so one of the things that we are hoping is that those elected officials, as they hear the work that we're doing, that they will step forward, not only to help us when the policy vote happens, but to help us and support us along the way, that they're in support of this publicly, that we have reparations for foundational Black Americans, so that when we get to 2024 and people ask which politicians are supporting reparations, I have a list so long I can't count.
I love it.
So
I love it. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So, just as we close out, I want you to tell people what's something that they can do to take action. What's that one thing you want them to do right now after hearing this?
Yes, right now I want them to join the myreparations.org and register so they can follow the work, and to reach out to see how they might want to join that work with us. And then to follow some of the things that we're doing to actually get that work done, because it's going to take a lot of people.
Okay, it will. It will take a lot of people, but I think you'll have a lot of people energized after they hear this today, and the more we get the word out. So again, thank you for joining us today. We will make sure that we get the information out to people. We'll make sure we continue to share it. We'll stay engaged in the events that you have and make sure we post that. To our listening audience, I do want you to go ahead and make sure that you go to MI Reparations and make sure you join. Talk to your family and friends. This is going to be something completely new to people. And for those individuals who are living comfortable lives, that's okay. They can continue to live comfortable lives, but the purpose is to honor our ancestors, to honor our history and our legacy, and to leave something more for our community. We don't want to take anything from anyone else. It's just getting what we deserve, right? And that's the message that we want to take forth to our community. Thank you for joining us today. I do also want to give a shout out to Tia Marie and the Tia Marie Sanders Foundation. And so we want you to follow them as well. And we will continue to bring the content for you so that you can stay engaged in the work. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thank everybody for watching Agape Social Justice Talk Show. I really appreciate all the love and support that you've given. Thank you for reaching out, giving words of encouragement. Thank you to those of you who have gone on our website, AGAPESocialJustice.com, and signed up to become a sponsor. Whether you have a business or not, you can always join in and support us. We thank you for spreading the word, sharing our episodes, and really making sure that people are learning and growing through this process. You can reach us again at AGAPESocialJustice.com. Thank you to our sponsors, the individuals who are listed on our website. Thank you to Tia Marie Sanders Foundation, Oakland County African American Family Network, police to protectors, and all of the organizations who've stepped in to make sure that we can provide the programming that we have today. We love you and blessings to you.